Welcome to the Chamber's Elevated Conversations podcast. And now, your host, Dave Eckmann.
Greetings. Welcome to another podcast of Elevated Conversations. I'm your host, Dave Eckmann. Well, as we sit on the 60th day of Governor Evers' emergency order of Safer at Home, we have obviously had impacts in the lives of people and businesses. And today we want to take another look into the economic aspect of the COVID-19 impact in the state of Wisconsin. And with us today to share this information is Mike Nichols, president of the Badger Institute. Mike will be first introducing his organization and then taking us through the recent study, The Cost of Shutting Down Wisconsin's Economy. Welcome, Mike Nichols from the Badger Institute. Mike, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well, Dave. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Mike, you and I, we've known each other for some years, and you actually presented at one of our annual dinners back a few years ago. And the Badger Institute, I'm sure a lot of folks don't know what that's about. And so what I'd like to do, Mike, is real quick, give you the opportunity to introduce the Institute.
Yeah, thanks, Dave. So I'm trying to remember, when I was up and spent the night with you guys at your chamber event, if we were still the Wisconsin Policy Research Institute. I think we had already changed our name to the Badger Institute, but some folks might be more familiar with the old name, WPRI. We kind of rebranded about a little less than 2 years ago to the Badger Institute, just because we thought the name resonated a little bit more with folks, Dave, and was a little more encompassing of what we do. So, we're still at heart, a policy research organization. We do, a lot of research on issues that we think are important for legislative reasons in Madison, including, the stuff that we're going to talk about today, which is the cost of the shutdown. But, we do research in a wide variety of areas, impacts of our, tax policy and regulation. We've been big on, what we think are overly, onerous regulations tied to professional licensure. We do a lot on workforce issues. You and I have talked about that, including some criminal justice issues and whatnot. We also have a magazine that we put out and do increasingly do a lot of stuff that's more sort of one-off, smaller policy briefs online, Dave. So, basically we do policy, we do journalism, we do some events, and an effort to shed some light on issues in Madison, provide data and research, and then also occasionally do a little bit of polling and try to also, as much as we can, educate folks, who are kind of outside the legislature as well.
Right, and I just want folks to know that they can go to your website just so they know it's badgerinstitute.org, right, Mike?
That's it, Dave. Yes, and the paper, the research that we're going to be talking about today is right at the top of the website. But yeah, it's www.badgerinstitute.org. Thanks.
Okay, so let's get right into it. As I have it on my website, and I printed off a copy as well. I would like to allow you just a few minutes or a minute or so, the cost of shutting down Wisconsin's economy. I know you're on top of the policy issues, but what really prompted this to the top of the list, at least right now, where we're at? Right.
So, enormous issue in this state, right? The biggest issue. We've seen a lot of people when discussing the impacts of the crisis, of the COVID-19 crisis, talking about the health impacts. I think, just about everybody in the state has, sees, practically, Dave, on a daily basis, how many cases there are out there and how many deaths there have been. And boy, we're not minimizing that at all. I mean, I looked at it this morning. We've had, 10,000 cases and there are 400 deaths, in Wisconsin, I guess, as of today. So not minimizing that in any way, but But what we feel has been lost often, and particularly up where you are and to the north of where you are, Marathon County and to the north, is the real economic suffering that's taking place as well. And so, you see sometimes a little bit, you have some folks who are trying to quantify the loss in some measure, and we happen to think that measuring the loss of GDP, which we can talk about later, is a good way to look at it. But you kind of see it like general numbers, and so we think that in addition to looking at at the impacts on health. On a county-to-county basis, we should be looking at the economic impacts at that regional and county level as well, because we're a big state. So really, to answer your question, we just think that there hasn't been enough data out there for really good decision making on when we should reopen the state and whether it should be done in a more nuanced regional way than is currently being allowed.
Right, and I appreciate that, as will those in our membership as well. Let's help the audience to understand in a basic form. When you talk about GDP, gross domestic product, what do you mean?
Yeah, it's just the value of goods and services that's produced in an economy over a given period of time. I would just say right now that we have visiting fellows who are economists, and one of them is Andrew Hansen, an economist who for a long time taught at Marquette and now teaches in Illinois, and he did all this analysis for us. I'm I guess representing Andrew's analysis here. We hired him, and he works for us on a regular basis. So I'm not an economist, but most people have heard of GDP, and again, just the value of goods and services that produce an economy. And most of us think of it as on a national basis, sort of national GDP. But of course, we have state level GDP as well. And it's easy to break that down even into county level GDP. So if you look at, the annual forecasted GDP, this would have been, Dave, prior to this crisis was going to be, $349, almost $350 billion in Wisconsin. And so, we think that, and that's annual. So, we can, Andrew has looked at what we think the loss would be of a partial shutdown over the course of a year and, over the course of a month or even over the course of a week. And then we can break that down even further to the county level. So that's just one set of sort of really interesting data that we have that I'd be happy to talk about.
That's interesting, because as you speak, I'm looking at the bottom line of your study where you were talking about the $349 billion. But if you were to project this out on a daily loss as to where it is right now, Mike, nearly $179 million daily in the GDP loss.
That's right, $179 million in lost GDP per day. And then I'm looking at the same page, Dave, at the bottom there, and we don't have these other numbers that I'm about to give you, but if you just multiply that out, over a month, it'd be over $5 billion, and over 2 months, it would be $10.7 billion in lost production in the state. And I think that's an interesting number to know, because we shut down. We had this partial shutdown on March 25th, basically. So we're 26th. So we're coming up on that 2 months already with this partial shutdown, and it doesn't look like anything's going to change here between now and May 26th. So a loss already of $10.7 billion in production. It's hard to even get our minds around that number. It's so big.
It's amazing. In fact, what I'll do is for the audience right now, I'm looking at Marathon County. That's our home. Daily, based on this study, we are losing 5.19 million GDP loss a day.
Yeah, Marathon County is, yes, I'm sorry, but yes, an enormous number. Marathon County is, I think you guys are the biggest geographic county in the state. Dave, am I right about that?
That's
geographically?
Correct. That's correct.
Yeah, not the biggest economy, but pretty darn big economy in Marathon County. So you see, in Milwaukee County, big economic driver loses 30 million, per day. Dane County about 20 million. Brown County about 9. But you guys are losing 5. I mean, you guys are usually a big economic producer in this state. There are 72 counties in the state, Dave, as you know, and there are a lot up north that really not a whole heck of a lot going on economically, at least in relative terms and relative to you guys. But yeah, $5,191,000. That's our estimate. We think it's a pretty good one just for you guys on a daily basis, and that's over a 20% loss of production for you, which is also a little bit higher than the average in the states. You guys are losing more on average than most counties in the state in terms of loss of GDP.
Yeah, this is interesting because when I look at the numbers here, Mike, and then I compare our experience with COVID-19 in Marathon County, the price we're paying from a regional standpoint with very low occurrence of the virus here, it's devastating as to what's going on here and continues to happen here in terms of the closures.
I just called up, this isn't part of our report, and on the health side again, because this stuff has been out there already. And as I'm sure you know, Dave, I mean, DHS puts out actually pretty good numbers, right, every day. And I just called them up here before we started chatting, and I can see that this was as of the 10th of May, 24. I would say only 24, positive cases in Marathon County, which is a big county, and 1 death. And again, not to minimize any one death, right, at all, but Marathon County is one of 53 counties in this state, and I just added these up to you just a couple moments ago that have either no deaths or 1 death, and I wish everybody were at 0. But 53 counties have one death or no deaths. You do have 400 deaths in this state so far. A lot of them, a lot of them in Milwaukee County, which is where I am. And again, it's a huge tragedy. But boy, I think it's fair and to look at the disparities in this state between places like where you are sitting and where I'm sitting, Dave.
And it sounds like in terms of where we're at with the data, the impacts, everybody's experiencing the adverse impacts of this. But when it comes to the regional reopening, we as an organization have stepped back behind the Back to Business plan by Wisconsin Manufacturers and Commerce. We feel it's a well-thought data-driven plan to help us move forward regionally. The economic data here tends to support that we need to be looking with our policymakers towards a regional approach to reopening. Do you have any opinions on that?
We've stayed silent on. I'm familiar with the WMC plan. Really respect the people at WMC, and Andrew, our economist, and I have decided we're not going to advocate for one plan or another. We feel like that we're going to, frankly, have the most influence and be most helpful if we can just make sure that people don't think that we have any preconceived notions, about what should happen. But man, let's get everybody to look at the data again. And I will say, boy, we sure need to have some type of nuanced approach, right, in terms of whether it's at a county level or in terms of which businesses and more businesses are able to open. So, we haven't come out and advocated specifically for any one plan. We just feel like what's been done thus far in terms of reopening certainly is not enough, Dave. Did I dodge your question?
No, I don't think so. I think it's important for people to understand that you really are a data-driven organization where you let the numbers and the information speak for themselves, and I think that's fair. So I guess what I want to do is let our audience know. Badger Institute, it's badgerinstitute.org. Mike Nichols is the president of the organization. I would encourage our audience to go to badgerinstitute.org and look up, like Mike said, it's at the front, the cost of shutting down Wisconsin's economy. If you want to go and see the analysis, 72 county analysis, and then rolled up to the state impacts, I would encourage everybody to do so. Mike, I want to thank you for your time today, and we look forward to further engagement with your organization.
Dave, thanks so much. I love talking to you, and I hope we get to do it again very soon. There's a lot more data in there that I hope people, if they're interested, can go and look at. So thanks again. Appreciate it.
This podcast episode is a production of the Greater Wausau Chamber of Commerce.